I got 6:30, so I will call the meeting to order for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. First item is to set the agenda. I think we had a couple of updates.
Correct, Manager Loth. Managers, two items that we would like to ask the board to consider. One is a discussion regarding the documents I sent out just early this afternoon on Lower St. Croix. So we had a meeting late Monday afternoon. Manager Anderson was in attendance along with only myself. And this is for the board to, the way the Lower St. Croix is set up, we'll get into that, but to approve that proposal. And the other is a discussion on the budget. We're looking to post something in the paper. So we want a consensus with the board on this.
Can I get a motion to accept the updated agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Doug. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jackie. Bobby, can we get a roll call, please?
Chris,
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
aye.
Jackie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the placement of those items on the agenda, I would imagine would be under new business.
The Lower St. Croix is under new business. The budget is under old business.
Okay, good, thank you.
Next item is a consent agenda. I need a, do we have to have a motion for this? I can't remember, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So we're not accepting the June 23rd minutes, just the June 9th minutes, it looks like.
At this point, yes, correct.
All right. We got a motion to accept the minutes from the June 9th meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Seconded.
thank you, Manager Taves. Can we get a roll call, Bobby, please?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a public open forum. Do we have anyone from the public that wishes to be recognized? Bobby, do you see anyone? I don't.
I do not.
All right. Then I will close the public forum. Move on to the Citizen Advisory Committee appointment.
Managers, Aiden Reed is here this evening, so I'll let him take this. Go ahead, Aiden.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and managers. Attached is an appointment letter for, attached is an appointment recommendation for Geneva Kubal, who is interested in joining our Citizens Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, she's not able to be here tonight. She did have a prior engagement, but I've been working with her for the past 2 months or so. She's an active member of the Forest Lake Lake Association. She's been attending our meetings for about 2 months. We met at a workshop actually. And so she's been a very engaged and interested member of our watershed district, and I can confidently recommend her appointment.
Thank you, Aiden.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Bobby, can we get a roll call, please?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Next, we'll move on to the AIS update.
Hello, Mr. Chair, managers, quick few updates here. Just share my screen quick. Let's see. You'd think I'd be faster at this by now. All right. Okay, like I said, few quick updates for everyone today. Starting with Forest Lake Flowering Rush. Steve McComas went out on July 12th, just a few weeks ago. Performed the first delineation of the year for Flowering Rush and was only found about 0.2 acres in total Flowering Rush across, I think, about 35 different locations. In comparison, last year, the very first survey, I believe, was about 0.6 acres. And I think there was twice as many, roughly, locations of where it was found. The first herbicide treatment is scheduled for tomorrow if the weather holds up, which I think the forecast is looking like it will. So no issues there. This will be the first of possibly up to 3 different treatments, but we'll just see what the results are after tomorrow. That following survey will kind of tell us if a second's needed and if a third is. The one observation that staff did make was an increase in the seed heads. Oops, sorry. So as a refresher from last year, we saw a very large increase in the number of seed heads. When I started with the district in 2019, I would go out with the WCD just because they had the watercraft. We were collecting maybe a few hundred over the course of a season. But last year, we collected over 1,200. Now, in just July of this year, staff, myself and another staff member went out just 2 times and we collected over 1,600 seed heads so far this season. And this is pretty early in the season. I think what is happening is that, again, last year we had those drought conditions where the water was receding. It was exposing lake sediment to the surface or to the air. And these are just really favorable conditions for flowering rush. So I think these seeds that weren't clipped in time or missed or, whatever this, or seeds that were just in the seed bank or in the sediment beforehand were able to sprout last year. And what we're seeing now this year is just that continued is, they were able to establish themselves last year even more. And we're still kind of in a drought condition right now. The lake is starting to recede again. So we're seeing a lot more seed heads. Now, again, we overall, if you combine all the total acreage of the plant, we're seeing less, but it's just for whatever reason, they are producing more seed heads. So staff is going to be going out pretty regularly, monitoring the lake. I know I've received several emails from folks around the shoreline, kind of helping us out, directing us to where to look. Hey, I got a couple seed heads in front of my property. So we're taking a pretty aggressive approach to make sure that we're getting on top of these before they go to seed and spread even more. But some updates there on that. On July 22nd, kind of while we were clipping seed heads, we also performed a Forest Lake Purple Loosestrife survey. We did a treatment last year and I believe the year before. And what we're seeing is that there are certainly some locations now after our second year of treatment that are noticeably improving. There is far less purple loosestrife in those locations. However, the Forest Lake 1 channel still remains pretty heavily infested. That was the worst location on the lake that we surveyed. But, I think it was to be expected. It takes several years of management to get reasonable control in some of these locations. So we're going to work on creating up a map next week, send that over to PLM, and hopefully have it treated here soon. Which ties into Keewatin. We started purple loosestrife management with herbicide last year. Several years back before I was with the district, the purple loosestrife eating beetles were utilized, but I think just given that what we're dealing with on Keewatin is just kind of a thin strip along the perimeter of the lake of purple loosestrife, are not just solid monocultures like several acres worth, that the beetles aren't as effective as they would be in that monoculture stand. There's still a lot, but this was a survey map on the screen that we did last October following a herbicide treatment, the first one, just kind of documenting which areas we thought were targeted well, which areas we think are going to be hot spots. Myself and another staff member will be either going out tomorrow or sometime early next week to perform the actual assessment survey, which then will be used to determine which locations we're going to treat again. And a PLM and lake management will also be performing that treatment. We have gotten some messages online from concerned citizens on Keewatin wondering if we were going to continue management of it, and we certainly are. It will take, again, several years of management to get control on some of these more infested areas, especially the wetland areas where their habitat's more favorable. But I think so far we're headed in the right direction. The one I'm most excited about, I think, is the Bone Lake Villager Tow that I had talked about last meeting. That was actually just conducted this morning with the assistance from Matt Downing at WCD. We went out and we recreated the test that was performed in 2019 by the DNR. Back then, they did Villager tows at 3 different locations in the lake, one just outside the treatment area at the public access, and then 2 other ones in deeper water. So just for consistency's sake, we went out, we performed the test at the same exact spots. And next week we'll be delivering those samples to the lab, which will be analyzed by the DNR free of charge to us, which was very nice of them. And hopefully we'll get to the bottom of the question of whether or not we still believe there to be a reproductive colony somewhere in that lake. The DNR's Villager Tow in 2019, after the treatment that the district performed, suggested that there was, but 3 years later, we're just not seeing it. We've had conversations with lake residents, asked them to check their docks. Staff has performed wading surveys. Stephen Combs has done diving surveys, and despite all that effort, we have yet to find any zebra mussels since that treatment. So if the results come back saying that, we didn't find much, that'd be a pretty amazing success story for us, I would say. So more to come on that. They didn't really give me an estimated turnaround time on those results, but as soon as I hear back, I will obviously share it with the board and also the Lake Association. And the last bit of information is the watercraft inspection program, which is chugging along pretty well. I was just able to get the information downloaded from the DNR's website on the inspections, and these figures are pretty accurate. I obviously at the end of the season, I do a more fine-tooth combing to make sure all the hours are logged correctly and inspections numbers are correct. But for right now, this is a good indication of where we're at about mid-July. So just going down the road here, Forest Lake, we're sitting at about 900 hours and 4,100 inspections so far. Bone Lake, 224 hours and then 557 inspections. In Comfort Lake, 188 hours and 448 inspections. In comparison to last year at about this time, we are basically on par for inspections and hours with Comfort and Bone Lake. And according to what I had last year in the AIS report, we are actually up quite a bit for inspections on Forest Lake. So it's been a busy season so far. We currently have 6 inspectors. We're expecting to lose a couple here in mid-August, but we're working on hiring another 1 or 2 to fill their spot. So I think we're pretty optimistic that we're gonna not only hit our hour goals that we had set by the end of October. But I think we're also going to be up there in the number of inspections we performed this year with our busiest year, which was 2020, if things continue the way they're going. But with that, I think that covers the main things we got going on with the AIS program. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
I just have one.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Thank you. I wondered if you've tried, or maybe even, it's maybe not a good idea, but if you've tried to get citizens on Forest Lake to come to training classes and help with that clipping on the flowering rush. Is that something you've tried and it hasn't worked, or is that something we should think about as far as outreach and education?
To a degree, I haven't pursued actually advertising that, but I have discussed with many homeowners, you know, when I'm in front of their property and waiters and they're freaking out like, what are you doing here? Who do you work for? Sort of thing. They always ask me, you know, how they can help out. And I just say, you know, you can take a plastic bag, you know, put the seed head into it, make sure you caption those seed heads and clip in it. But yeah, certainly we can include that in future information going out. That'd be very helpful. The only thing that I think we'd probably end up losing is a more accurate count, but I think overall the positives probably outweigh the cons, in that, you know, they'll be able to probably get to those seed heads faster than us in some cases. You know, obviously it's on their shoreline. They're probably more observant about it. So yeah, that's a really good suggestion. We can certainly do that.
I think maybe, Chris, that might be something you can discuss with your lake association. We had great success in Comfort. I've talked about it before with Curly Leaf. That was the biggest AIS that we had at the very beginning of the district, but the Lake Association had the DNR come out and train people on how to recognize it and how to pull it out by the roots and so forth. And it's been amazing how that has controlled that AIS. We have so little of it, we don't treat it anymore. So I think that might be something Forest Lake Association could get active in as well.
Yeah, I'll send an email to Jerry and copy Garrett. We can figure out kind of what we can put together for that.
Mhm.
Mike, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, Manager Loth, managers, just on this particular item, you'll recall from a few years ago that one of the main reasons we were initially reluctant was that we were concerned that people would start helping by trying to physically remove the plant, and it spreads by rhizome. So then that could actually help spread it. So we'll just have to make sure that in our communications that either we have like a neighborhood lead or somehow incorporate that into the training. Now that we have more staff capacity to, you know, help facilitate that kind of education. But yes, good suggestion. And it is an effective method, doing the removal. So,
Do we know if we'd need the DNR to come out and do training, or is the watershed capable of doing that?
I was actually about to jump in. A couple months ago, the Wild Rivers Association and the Chisago County partnered and held a little AIS workshop, and I was a guest speaker, and I actually created a presentation on flowering rush and management techniques and whatnot. So I have a lot of that information ready to go, and I'd be very willing and happy to help out with any kind of training.
Sounds good.
Manager Loth,
Yeah, go ahead, Manager Taves.
Garrett, is it possible to put together a short video presentation of that could be available online for people that can't make it to a meeting or that you don't bump into?
We could certainly record in the future, and I am almost fairly certain somewhere out in the internet there's a video of me speaking floating around, which I could track down. So yes, we could do that, and I think there already is one that exists. I would just have to locate it.
Okay, appreciate that.
I just had one question for you. the purple loosestrife in Forest Lake on the channel, Lake One channel. Are you referring to the bay on the south side of Lake One, or is it the channel between Lake One and Two?
Apologize. That's maybe just a term staff use internally. It's the Forest Lake One basin, and it's kind of like that little finger channel that heads south. Some homes back in there and whatnot. The channel splits off, and but anyway, that towards the margins of that channel, it's pretty shallow, kind of a wetlandish area, and yeah, the purple loosestrife has really taken hold on some of those locations. So that is going to be a spot that's probably going to be the last to actually be controlled, but we are making progress.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but
I guess I could have, yeah, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Manager Loth.
Yeah,
Manager
go ahead,
Baki.
Manager Baki.
Garrett, I'm going back to Lake Keewatin. I'm looking at the budget that you sent out, and I don't see any dollars assigned for that lake. Is there money? Are we paying for the purple loosestrife treatment on that lake?
or am I mixing up last year with this year? I believe we transferred money. If that's not the case, we can certainly do a budget transfer on that again. I believe the expense. Oh man, sorry. No.
No problem. I'm just looking at what you sent. There's a July 22nd, 2022 date on it. It just doesn't indicate any money in that budget for any AIS.
That is a good observation. Okay, so yeah, I will bring forward a proposal to do a budget transfer in the near future before that treatment. I believe the expense last year was $800, so it's not a whole lot. We'll just shuffle some things around since we didn't have to do treatment on Moody Lake this year and Bone Lake. We will have at least a little bit of funding to cover that. So
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Garrett? If not, we can move to new business. Cost share program summary.
Manager Loth, managers, we just wanted to take a little bit of time to go over what our current program is and what we have in our watershed management plan. And this is just a discussion piece, not intended to really, I guess a precursor to a future board discussion about what our program might look like going forward. So knowing that we have some decisions in the works on this topic. So Emily's put together a few slides, so I'll let her go ahead and present that. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, managers. I will share my screen. So kind of as Mike has said, we're going to give an overview of the various cost share programs that are outlined in our watershed management plan. We've talked about some of them here and there, and so we just kind of wanted to bring it together. And it's timely too, because I think this is going to be a growing topic as we get further into this next 10-year planning period. We're getting closer to meeting our lake water quality goals. We've been really focused on these big capital improvement projects. And we think that cost share is going to come into a greater focus over the next 10 years and relate to some of those newer goals in the watershed management plan. So here just on the first slide is a nice image. It's kind of grainy, but just that nice idea of kind of what a shoreline could be. You can still have some grass and a beach and everything, but still be mostly covered with these, tall shoreline grasses and, that natural aquatic vegetation out in the water and still have a kind of clear area. So just an overview of the residential cost share, the residential landowner grant. Right now, it is focused on this $500 plant grant. Prior to 2018, the district offered kind of a more traditional cost share funding for larger projects, rain gardens, shoreline buffers, things like that. The board had discussed it at several meetings and was recognizing that generally, you know, compared to some of these big water quality projects like the Shields Lake stormwater reuse and those big capital projects, these residential projects had a lot smaller water quality benefits. But of course, we know they've got other multiple benefits. And so, like I was saying, that these kind of smaller and more multiple benefits might come into focus over the next 10 years. For example, the shoreline buffers. Staff estimates we need to restore an estimated 500 or more shoreline lots in order to meet some of the shoreline buffer goals. And so I'll linger on this slide a little bit. It's a summary of the goals in our current 10-year plan for shoreline vegetation coverage. And so that is the percentage widthwise of the lakeshore that has 75% or more of good vegetation coverage. And we pulled this from Blue Water Science surveys that they have done for us in the past. They had a very meticulous way of estimating shoreline coverage. And the lakes that we do have surveys for are Bone Lake, Little Comfort Lake, Keewatin, Forest, and Comfort. And all but Little Comfort are below the goal that the board had set. Some may recall that during the plan amendment process, we had gone back and forth with the goals a lot, and it went through a very iterative process between the board and input from technical advisory committee, citizen advisory committee. And so the goals that we ended up on are very ambitious. We had originally proposed just maintaining at what they're already at. So for example, Forest Lake is at 27%. Our original proposed goal was just no net loss of that lakeshore buffer coverage. And the board wanted to make it across the board 75%. And so for some of these, it's, you know, maybe 18 shoreline lots that need to be restored, maybe it's 6. For Forest Lake, it's going to be on the order of 480, maybe close to 500, and total an estimated 46,000 linear feet of shoreline. So it's a very ambitious goal, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us. And so there might be, the board might want to consider the methods for doing that, and cost share program and increasing the outreach for that is definitely one way to do that. And you can see that we have been actually since 2020 trying to increase that, at least just the plant grant program that we do offer. The amount of site visits and engagement with that, and Aiden Reed has been really helpful in getting that program running this year. And so these are just kind of stats in the most recent years. Aiden updated these for us. So we are on an increasing trajectory here, and I think there's a good chance that we'll want to continue to increase that. And so in the near term, having the shoreline restoration incentive and cost share program, we also earlier this year had applied for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's Green Corps member program. You apply similar to kind of a grant application that we're used to. This was our first time applying, and we were selected. And so they're going to set us up with a Green Corps member, and I believe we already have the person's name and kind of getting ready to go to get them starting this September. And Aiden will be another big help in working with that individual, and there's professional development, and then, you know, guiding them and having them kind of do this work. And the shoreline cost share program is an area of focus that we would like to see for that person. And so we just have one slide, I believe, on ag and rural. We just had a program highlight on this at the last meeting. Just kind of a reminder of some of the broad strokes of things going on right now. This farmer-led council trying to do cost share and incentives and doing BMPs on the landscape, as well as providing that educational and technical assistance. This one is just, I want to do a placeholder. I know that we have this on our radar and it's going to come back, I think, for a further discussion, but just to round out the various grant programs, cost share programs that we have in the watershed management plan. Here's just for reference what the commercial community grant in the plan is. And I know we'll come back to that, so I won't spend too much time on here. And finally, we just had a municipal stormwater grant where the target audience is our municipalities, the cities. And it's really been for stormwater treatment projects that go above and beyond minimum regulations. So even cities, all private public entities, if they're going to be doing a project out on the landscape, maybe it's a roadway improvement, they oftentimes will trigger our rules. And that may require some minimal level of best management practices out for them to incorporate into their design. This grant program exists if they want to use that opportunity to go above and beyond, provide more storage or more treatment than what's just minimally required. Historically, we haven't had very much participation in this program. We think so. One of the elements that has been part of this program policy is it requires 50% cost share by the cities. And in talking with the district engineer, Greg Grasky, he's had a lot of kind of more informal conversations with our cities. And even just in this past year, there's been a lot of good conversations with regard to the city roadway projects and just looking for opportunities to provide more treatment where it is possible. Now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in the cities providing much of that cost. And so I think this is something, just an overview of where we're at now, but we might try to bring back some revisions to consider in the future to maybe try to encourage more participation. And so that's all I had. Those were the slides that we have prepared. Just kind of a brief overview, just to kind of highlight those various programs and get maybe some of the newer managers more familiar with them.
Thank you, Emily. Does anyone have any questions?
Manager Loth, Manager Baki.
Yeah, go ahead, Manager Baki.
Emily, for the cost share program for the Lakeshore residential landowners, have we tried reaching out directly to those, for example, 18 on Bone Lake, who need some restoration?
Not yet, but I think this is something where there is kind of that opportunity for targeting. And when we put more staff time and have more hours to allocate to doing that program, I think that's exactly the kind of targeting that we'll want to do.
Thank you.
Emily, I had a question on the 480 lots on Forest Lake to get to that 75%. Is that 480 lots, each lot has to be 75% good vegetative coverage? And is that what a normal expectation would be? Or if someone restores, is it unreasonable for someone to go above the 75 and reduce the number of lots that would need to be restored to get to that total linear feet?
The way that we had been calculating was using that Blue Water Science survey method. And my understanding of it is that it is not that cumulative, like you could have 75 consecutive % of the lake is good and then just a barren chunk of 25%. I don't think it's like that. I think it's they want 75% of this lot to be good, and that counts toward the total percentage of lots that are there. But I think we can, I see what your point is, and I think, the district can decide to measure in the way that it wants, if that seems more appropriate.
So it's 75% of the 75% restored. 75% of the lots are at 75% restored.
Yes.
Got it. Mike, I see your hands up. You can go ahead.
Those managers. Right. Well, a couple of things. First, to the outreach piece. I mean, we've known this through our workload analysis component, and just our year-to-year work plan analysis that we do is that we've just struggled to allocate enough staff hours to do this. So this has been on the slow back burner. We've been, why also given the amount of time that was being consumed with some of the larger projects, given the amount of benefit that was being received by the water body, that we moved to this plant grant format. However, we certainly are looking at creating a new framework to expand and give, I would say, multiple tiers of benefit, if you will. Because the thing that I would like to start out with is from a framework is what is the DNR guidance in terms of what's allowed. I mean, that's 30-foot path, 30-foot wide access for 50% of the lot, whichever is less. So so it would vary depending on that. So one is just to agree. I think the watershed management plan is the district's plan, of course. And there will certainly be some challenges, but at the same time, we know that there are plenty of people that are willing to accept a restored shoreline, and it's a lot of education. It's going to be helping to reframe the vista, so to speak, and each resident's own relationship with the lake themselves, if you will. So, and I think we've probably have all had that opportunity to be on some lakes that are, I guess, far more preserved, and we can see the value just from that perspective, and it's a collective vision. And I mean, I just would commend the I think it's a combination of both the city and the residents around Comfort Lake that they've been able to maintain the level of native or buffer shoreline that's there. So it's not as if it's not possible. It's a matter of creating, I think, a program and to a degree an expectation of what we would like to see. I've often joked over the years that Forest Lake was probably called Forest Lake for a reason. And so, the absence of trees seems pretty unnatural. And we continue to observe, wholesale removal. We saw 2 lots again this year where the contractor came in at the, request or direction of the builder and removed every tree and ounce of vegetation all the way to the shoreline. So there's some pieces like that are really tough to work against. And that's I think as much of a cultural thing as anything.
Thanks, Mike. Did anyone else have any questions or comments on the cost share program?
Manager Loth, I guess, Manager Baki, if I may. I guess, we have worked through the Bone Lake Association to offer this grant to restore shorelines. And, I really think that we've exhausted those who are willing to to do it and make some changes in their shoreline. I do think, like Emily suggested, reaching out to those people who have been identified who need the shore restoration, if we could somehow provide them with the information from the DNR, as Mike is suggesting, and then provide them with some ideas as to what they may do, that may be a more proactive way of getting closer to our goal.
Thank you,
I'll just
Manager
make-
Bucky.
I'll just make one comment. I'm biting my lip, but keep all of this in mind when we discuss the Lake Association Grant Program next month, when Steve returns from his vacation, because that's the foundation of that idea, was to get the lake associations involved in the important projects that are going to help sustain the health of the lakes. We're doing all these big projects to stop the inputs from bad decisions of the past and development and so forth. And now it's going to be up to the people that live closest to the lake, especially in that lake management zone. It goes beyond the shoreline. It's in that 1,000 feet that surrounds every lake. It's a very highly zoned. It's the highest zone that with regulations that exists in local ordinance. And it should, that's where the DNR comes in with their guidance, but making sure that those who control land decisions, which is your local government, city or township, that they're fully educated and you become watchers of that resource, basically. But the DNR has a beautiful program that they put together called Score Your Shore. And so the idea with the lake associations is to get them engaged as educators. The district can't do all of this. And so get those people involved at that level, your neighbors. So you're sharing that information. Obviously, we'll work in concert with the district and the Lower St. Croix educators, but the bulk of it is going to be, the influence is going to be with people you know. And so keep that in mind. We'll discuss all of this, but Emily's presentation tonight just fits in perfectly with the objective of that program.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Anything else? Hearing none, we can move to the Lower St. Croix, excuse me, partnership proposals.
Measure Lowest managers. So as we noted earlier, Manager Anderson, Emily, and myself, and I attended the meeting on Monday afternoon, and I don't know if Manager Anderson wants to start out. Or Emily's been part of the planning team, advisory committee on behalf of the district, and helping to really work all the details and the reporting and help facilitate the proposal to the policy committee that they have approved and now sent back to the partners for hopefully a majority will approve, and then the funding will come into place.
I think I'll just do an overview, and then Emily, this packet that you see, attached to this this subject on the agenda is Emily's work. And it's really nice to have this access to data readily available so that when questions come up, you can look at this document and pull out what questions, the answers to the questions people are asking. So I just want to point that out, starting on page 1, steering committee, policy committee, that's the 2 on the top, May 11th document, the WBIF project request. Now, I don't know if these are standard forms or if this is something, Emily, you put together. So maybe you can answer that first.
So the memo to the policy committee from the steering committee.
Mhm.
No, that's not a standard form. The project request forms were standardized templates, but I had just written that memo on behalf of the steering committee and had them review it.
Okay, so the May 11th one, I said the 12th, I think before, but May 11th, that's yours?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at something else. May 11th. Well, I also did take a lead in creating this project request form template.
Okay. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. You know, this is, if you look at this, everything is laid out there. And so you're building your case with data, which is what Watershed should be doing. And we deal with a lot of SWCD folks who have a different way of planning. And so this is really important because it lays not only the statistical data, but really the process that we go through to identify and then to rate a project on its results and the benefit that it creates. So I just wanted to point that out for everybody so that I don't know that I've seen this with our projects even, but I think this is a great way to quantify a project for the board, is to use this format. So I wanted to give a shout out about that, and maybe we can incorporate that into, you know, our regular routine. We have that data, but it's not presented in this nice, clean way. So kudos to staff here, Emily, for putting all this together. The initial reaction when we talked about this was at the Lower St. Croix Policy Committee. It was kind of tepid. I wasn't sure if this was really going to pass or not. Mike was, I was on Zoom and Mike came into Zoom. He had another commitment, but he made time, held time in case we needed him. And he came on, which helped. And I think what helped me is having this information, of course, so that when I talked, I could talk about the need for this project, what it was going to accomplish, but gave an opportunity also to talk about those differences between the people that were hesitating, the differences between how you do a watershed project and a SWCD project. And we got comments then joining from our county people. There was reference, an analogy made to this being the same as a road project, because I talked about the time that it takes to get through these projects. It can take 3-4 years to actually get all of that background information and different levels of studies before we get to identifying a good project. And the same thing, he said, happens with roads, which was helpful, I think, because it gave a real life common experience that most people have had in their neighborhoods when road projects come in and at the local level. So I think that helped. The counties chimed in, most of them with support after that. And by the end of the meeting, both of these projects were approved 11-4. There's 16 members in the partnership in the Lower St. Croix. And so that's really, really a good indication of support. We had a lot of complimentary comments made about the importance of both of these projects. And as Mike mentioned, in the partnership, the policy committee is just an advisory committee, and we're the representatives from each of our organizations, and the actual decision has to go back to each of those 16 partners. And so the boards of each of those partners must make their own decision about whether to support or not support. And that's what's before you tonight is we're asking that you support this decision and vote yes. And I'll let Mike take it from here.
Yeah, Janet, thank you. Well, I don't know if there's really any questions. Otherwise, yes, Emily's been integral in putting all this together. And if there's any specific questions on And then regarding the May 11th memo, it's part of that hyperlink on page 2. So these are the documents and pieces that we initially put forth for our May advisory committee that Emily and I attended, and then it got kicked to June and then to July, and finally got to the advisory or the policy committee. So, and, you know, it was really, our recommendation was somewhat pragmatic from the standpoint that the fiscal year 21 dollars are, would go through next year, but there's nothing really in the pipeline that any of our partners have brought forward to say, you know, let's keep some money held back. And in fact, we would anticipate the way Emily and I, and with the help of Chuck, crafted the memo and the motion recommendations was such that there's, if they don't get farther along or get some dedicated projects, you know, by the end of the year, we would think it would be prudent to take more of the 21 funds that are remaining and allocate them to these projects rather than taking it out of the 23-24 budget. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's going to be up to the group, I guess. So, yeah,
Mike, can I just add to that point that you just made, because that's really important. I thought the conversation we had at the meeting on the policy committee, there was a general, I felt, lack of understanding of how, first of all, how long it takes to get projects, but secondly, how to utilize these implementation funds. And that's what they are. It's money for implementation. So your projects have to be ready to go when you apply. And so I just wanted to underscore that the simple way, you know, at the end of that big discussion was to just remind them, which I did, that you are getting money every 2 years. You have 3 years to spend it, but then you get another round of money after that first 2 years. So as long as the metro area watersheds continue to give the money to the Lower St. Croix group, because we get the biggest allocation set aside, which is 800,000+, and the rest of the Lower St. Croix, which is not part of metro, it's usually around that 300 to 400 mark. So it helps, you know, to kind of remind them that they've got more time to utilize these funds than they might think, and that they get their next deposit, if you will, before that period is over. So that 3-year period is over. Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Emily, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Manager Loaf, managers. I just wanted to clarify one other point too, that there was discussion at the policy committee meeting and people were concerned about already allocating fiscal year 23 dollars. And I just didn't want the point to be lost that at a minimum, there still is going to be $463,000 of these implementation funds available to other partners to do projects that, to our understanding, are not yet identified. And so we're not by no means taking up all of the fiscal year 23 dollars.
I got a question. Were there other projects that came up through this process besides these two, or I guess how does that work its way through to identify these two for approval as a final step?
yes, so, well, right, Emily's been on the planning team, but the process has been that, you know, there was a staff developed form, and there's copies in there for both the South Washington and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake one. You know, I would say that I would have maybe had a little different ranking on the form from my standpoint. And so there's been other projects, but they've been typically much smaller. And there's also been I would say a little bit of I don't want to say inconsistent, however, not a very well defined process, from the planning team, which then makes recommendations to the advisory committee, which then goes to the policy committee, and then back to the entities. So, and why we think that having an entity overall for the Lower St. Croix makes more sense, because then it would certainly reduce this administrative process. However, so the one thing is that the framework for decision making has kind of been a little bit all over the place, I guess, or just not been super consistent. And some people will kind of make one point and then the other. And so that was kind of a discussion then too. And it really then came to head, I think, with the policy committee the other day. And I was actually glad to see that they want to take this topic up for discussion. So hopefully it'll result in a better framework for all the partners to consider when bringing something forth, but then also giving some additional guidance to staff as to how to present information and review financial requests, project requests.
Yeah, I think in my input on that, Chris, is that there hasn't been a really good communication with the 16 partner entities on how this process is going to work, how it's laid out. But the real underlying problem is the money problem. And until they get a handle on how that rotation in and out of the money works, then we're going to continue to have problems. And by that, I mean that when we're working on projects, watershed districts, we have to work years ahead, like I was saying, to identify the projects. And then when we have that ready, we have to get some funding in advance of starting the project. And the project itself might be a 2-year project. So you've got to have your money lined up. It's no different than building a house. You get a loan before you start building, and you have to have all of it, up front, so that you're not caught in the middle all of a sudden and you don't have enough to finish the project. And so the same thing is true with these big civic projects that we do. We have to make certain that if we need $1 million or $2 million, that we've got that locked in, that source is locked in from the very beginning when we start the project. And that's what I don't think our people that are actually running these various operational divisions or departments don't get yet.
So I guess other than the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District and the South Washington Watershed District, were there other entities that had projects that they wanted considered that didn't make it this far?
I don't think there were any submitted so far. I think, again, it depends on how, this message has to get out to them that we're ready to operate. Now, they should know that because they've got representatives at each of the meetings. But I think there has to be a more concentrated effort, a more purposeful education that goes out to each of the 16 partners.
Okay.
Yeah, Emily can speak to this, but there's been other projects that have come forth and already approved. So, but most of them have been much smaller in scope.
Well, and that's true and that's a good point, because those 50,000 and under, I think that's the threshold. The committees can move those projects through. Most of those have been ag related. And so I don't know that I would qualify them the same as these watershed projects, but there have been several of those that have gone through already.
Correct. So, and some of the reason that we're not seeing a lot of demand for the existing funds through this is that on the ag side, the feds have been, there's a lot of money through the USDA EQIP program, Environmental Quality Insurance Program. And then on top of that, Chisago County in particular has been successful in getting some additional USDA grants. So I think they're already challenged to spend the money they have from other grant resources or other sources. So, and while that really wasn't, discussed, I guess, as part of this decision-making process, but it's just a reality. And so I thought it was the right decision on the part of the policy committee, and I'm glad they took the recommendation of staff.
I thought it was a very good discussion, and our chair, who is commissioner from Washington County, he thanked the group several times. It was a very respectful discussion. There was no anger, and so it was a good discussion. It changed some minds, and like I said, it didn't feel so certain when we started, but by the end, you could just see the change in attitude in some of the folks by the discussions that we were having. So that's a good thing. I think not only was it good for us immediately, but I think overall, long-term, it's really good to see that education gain, if you will, the comprehension gain in the group. So I thought it was really helpful and worthwhile, and a lot of that goes into making the data understandable. And again, going back to this packet of information and how it's presented, it's very easy to explain something when you've got it laid out very logically and easy for people to get their head around.
Manager Law, Manager Baki.
Go ahead, Manager Baki.
Yes, can we go down a couple of pages in this document? It's numbered page 1, but it's actually page 4, I think. It has the funding options discussed at the July 13th steering committee, and it lists option 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, that's it. Option 1, 2, and 3. You go back. There it is, option 1, option 2, option 3. So I just want to be clear. This was discussed and recommended by the steering committee that we go with option 3, and that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're voting on tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, and it was the policy committee on Monday, last Monday, that voted to approve option 3 as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I think there's a motion to approve policy committee's motion on the 25th on Monday on these 2 projects. I think I heard Manager Tays offer the motion. Do we have a second?
I will second if no one else will. I was hoping that there would be 2 other members of the board that would do this.
I could second.
All right, thank you.
Bobby, can we get a roll call, please?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loaf,
Aye.
Manager Taves, Manager Anderson,
Hi.
Thank you. I guess we will move on to the administrator assessment document.
Yes, thank you, Manager Lowe's managers. So as noted, we had the special meeting on May 25th, and we had at the time Eric from Gallagher along with Alan Hendricks present with the board, and there was a presentation, and I offered that as well. There were within that was a memo that was recommended as a format, and along with the piece that says the observations and recommendations. So from that, I guess we would look to have a motion to accept those items. And then I guess decide that, we're going to have these quarterly meetings, and if those were going to be on a rotation basis with different managers, or the same two for reporting, or working on the final memo at year end, or how the board desired to move forward with that part. So I guess really kind of two pieces here. One is the items from Gallagher to approve as a framework, and the other is the working through the SMART goals for myself, and then how to how the board would want to set up the quarterly meetings.
Is Gallagher, excuse me, Manager Loth. I
Go
have a
ahead.
question.
Go ahead, Manager Anderson.
Thank you. Is Gallagher coming back to present this to the board so that, like in a workshop or something, so that we can ask questions about some of this? Or is tonight your objective just to get this approved, and then we can have the details of how it's going to work later? I get the idea of it, of course, just by going through the presentation, but I do have a couple of questions that would be nice to ask. So I have no problem with the concept of this and the way it's structured. I have no problem at all with that. But I do just have some questions that I'd like to ask someone. So I would maybe offer that as a recommendation. And I'm prepared to accept this tonight, but with the caveat that we have an opportunity to meet with Gallagher to just ask some questions.
Manager Loth, managers, Manager Anderson, I guess it would really be, if the full board wants to have a conversation, or if it's just Manager Anderson. Because right now we would not be scheduled to have them back for any further discussion or presentation, but I can certainly make an inquiry on this as we're wrapping up. We just met last week with the staff to present the assessment tool and framework for them, for the district. And again, Alan has been assisting in that process. So, and that'll be something that we are looking to implement for, within the next couple of weeks, so we can have it ready to go by September 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that would be the question, if it would be, if more managers have questions and you would like Eric to return for a discussion with the board, or if it's with just Manager Anderson.
Mm-hmm. I have no problem sending my questions to him by email. They're not, like I said, it's not a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Manager Anderson, would you be willing to share your questions for us and for myself and the other managers, or do you want to wait?
I can send those to you as well. We don't have to discuss them tonight if we don't have time, but I guess it's just in some of the way that the information is going to be handled. I wasn't quite clear on that. What's the outcome of certain ratings, for example, and what is their vision for that process? And maybe that's explained. Maybe I missed it in here, but I'll reread it again. But most of them have to do with that. And what are we doing with the table of positions, if you will? that we've laid out for our positions in all of the different areas of our organization. So I need to see that correlation, I guess.
Are you referencing other documents that weren't included as part of the?
It's the schedule of
Packet.
salaries and positions. And what happens, you know, when you get a good rating, what happens when you have a bad rating? How does that impact, you know, that salary decision, that raise decision?
Sure. I guess I would be interested in that conversation as well. I do recall that document from probably the 25th of May when we talked about it, but
Mhm. So that's it. I think this is a good program. I really do. I just need those couple of things answered for my own benefit.
Manager Loth, Manager Baki.
go ahead, Manager Bach.
Can we scroll down to the SMART goals that Mr. Kinney has identified?
Mhm.
And I'd like to share my picture of what I see us doing as a board as we go forward with this. Mr. Kinney has identified some SMART goals that will become the basis of our, and it was mentioned that we would review these on a quarterly basis. But I would encourage Mr. Kinney to kind of organize his reports to us at our meetings around these SMART goals, and that can give us more information about how we're moving forward in meeting these SMART goals. The goals are listed as administration, programs, and projects, and they're very specific, giving timelines and what measures we will know when we get there. And I guess that's kind of my picture of how the review for Mr. Kinney will progress. And as I've shared with Mr. Kinney, I mean, if you don't meet these goals in the time that is specified, that's not a win-lose situation. It's more of a, okay, we didn't get there. What do we have to do as we move forward? It's kind of a conversation about how do we improve not only as an organization, but Mr. Kinney himself as a professional. So that's kind of the way I see it. I understand Ms. Anderson's, Manager Anderson's question as well. That's real not clear to me either, how this will work for other employees in the organization. But this is kind of my picture of how we're going to operate as we go forward.
Thank you, Manager Bucky. I think Manager Anderson's was specific towards Administrator Kinney's review and how a review would correlate to a pay raise and what that looks like. Is that right, Manager Anderson?
Yes, but also to employees as well. I thought this program concept was being applied to all of our employees.
Yeah, it is. And it is as part of his second goal, which I thought was a very good idea. I'm not sure what the review process is for staff, but to put something together that has a solid framework for Administrator Kinney and then for him to apply that to staff, I think is a great idea, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So are we as a board willing to make the motion to accept the recommendations in the attachment without having the specificity around how performance correlates to a pay raise?
Yes, I'd be willing to make the motion that we accept what has been outlined here.
Mm-hmm. I'll second that. And I understand Manager Baki assisted our president in this effort, and I thank you for that. It is a clearer pathway forward, so I agree with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, it isn't real defined at this point, and I think that's our process, is to kind of tighten this up as we go forward, and that's for all of us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Did we need to discuss the quarterly review and if it's the same managers every quarter, or was that something that could be discussed as a follow-up in addition to the review outcome and how that might correlate to performance raises?
Well, I feel that we should wait until our president comes back to participate in that discussion. It's a pretty important one and something, you know, just because of the interaction with the president. It's much more weighted that way than to regular managers. And so I just think that we should wait until he gets back for that.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, can we get a roll call, Bobby?
Manager Baki,
Oh, he's on mute.
I'm sorry, my connection has been, are we voting?
Yes.
yes, Manager Baki,
Sorry, aye.
thank you. Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Next, we'll move on to old business B, which was the 2023 budget and the notice into the newspaper.
It's mental health managers. One other thing, I'll send a couple more pieces on that, some of the questions that the board had on the performance assessment piece. And as is often the case of Emily being an overachiever, she was able to tie back to the watershed management plan, hers. And so I thought it was a really nice piece. So I've drafted, or she helped me do the same with my SMART goals. And I think it's a framework that I'll share with the board as well, and we'll look forward. So the assessment piece tonight was supposed to be just for myself, but if there's more questions, I'll get in touch with Eric and we'll get those addressed. So yes, we've added this item to the agenda because part of our process is that we would need to have a legal notice put out for the budget and the levy, and Emily can speak to that process, but based off of our current dates, we would want that to be out by Monday, I believe. That's correct.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Managers, so thank you for adding this agenda item. We would like to just get at least an informal consensus. We've been discussing the budget for the past few meetings. It wasn't originally on this. We were planning to come back to 8/11. Then we realized that we need to get this public notice out before that meeting. And we'd just like to be clear on just two numbers that need to go in this public notice, and that is the total expense budget, and that is the proposed levy. What goes out in this public notice, it should be kind of within range, but it doesn't have to be the final. I think it's just to give an idea to the public of what we're talking about, and further discussion can occur at meetings and at that public hearing. The total expense budget that we've been, from the start of it, we put out up until, just recently, was 4.9 million. 1 million of that was for the Forest Lake alum treatment. So at the next board meeting, you will have the Forest Lake in-lake feasibility study that EOR has just completed. We've been going through review, and we're really excited to bring it forward. I think you all will enjoy seeing it. One of the kind of interesting things coming from that is the recommended budget for a Forest Lake alum treatment is nowhere near as high as we thought it was going to be. We thought we would need to treat 2 basins. They actually think, based on the data that they've collected and kind of preliminary dosing, they could do a treatment in the middle basin, and it would have the impact that we would be looking for to improve the water quality lake-wide. So that being said, to kind of cut to the chase, we are recommending changing that single budget line item from 1 million in 2023 to about 300,000. So that has a big bearing. It'll bring us from 4.9 million to 4.2 million. And so Given that, that would be staff's proposed budget. Now, I know we've been talking about 4.9 and the full board hasn't seen this information yet. And so we wanted to bring this forward and just get the board's opinion on what would you like to put out in the public notice. And again, it doesn't have to be final, but just understanding what we want to put out there. And the levy as well. Right now, we've been talking about what would it look like to keep it flat. In the budget, we've been showing at 1.6 million. We've prepared some scenarios of what it would look like if increased in step with the estimated market values and the net tax capacity. If it were to increase in line with those figures that increase each year, it'd be up to 1.7 million. So these are some of the numbers that we're talking about, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm hoping the board can discuss and maybe give some direction on what you'd like to see go out in that public notice.
Manager Loth, I have a question.
Thank you, Emily. Go ahead, Manager Anderson.
When is the deadline for putting this notice in the paper?
We'd like to put it out by the end of next week. We'd like to do it on Monday, ideally, just so it's by the deadline. I'd like to be ahead of those, but definitely before the next board meeting where we'll discuss that.
And is this a notice for what? For that we're talking about it, or that it's proposed, final, or I put the context in that for me, please,
Sure.
in the announcement.
So part of the one required step of our budget process is to hold a public hearing. In order to hold that public hearing, we need to duly notice, and it has to be published 2 weeks consecutively, 2 weeks in advance of that meeting. So it's kind of a long lead time when you consider their things. So it's not, this is the final proposed, but we can say preliminary, draft, and it will be finalized after that public hearing.
I thought the public hearing was closer to the deadline for turning it into the county.
From our schedule, we had proposed in our budget schedule, doing that at the August 25th board meeting.
The public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And the notification has to be 3 weeks in advance. Is that what you're saying?
So it'll have to be posted. Our official newspapers go out on Thursdays. So it'll have to go out in the 18th and the 11th. And so we try to get this in the week prior. So to get it posted in the 11th, we submit the request the week prior, and that is next week.
That's a pretty dramatic drop from our current budget. Our current budget is 4.6, I thought.
The current 2023 draft or the 2022 budget?
2022.
2022 budget. Sorry, I don't have that. Let me find.
Well, my recommendation is to keep it at the 4.9. I want to see that information that you're talking about and on the alum treatment. But I think that there are some things that we haven't talked about yet that the board needs to consider. And so I'm not comfortable lowering that amount. We can always lower it later, but for the public notice, I think it has to be at the number that we're discussing right now and have been discussing.
Does the second notice have to be the same exact notice as the first one?
I think so, yes. And Chuck, maybe correct me if I'm wrong in that.
Mr. Chair, Emily, I think you've been correct in everything you've said.
Thank you, Chuck.
Manager Loth,
Go ahead, Manager Taves.
question for Emily. Where would these notices appear?
In the Chisago County Press and the Forest Lake Times,
Okay,
in the legal notices section.
thank you.
there any other questions? Do we need a motion?
I think a motion can hurt just to, yes, please go ahead, Manager Anderson.
I was going to propose a motion to post notice for our budget at the 4.9 million.
Do we also need to reference the levy aspect of it?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would just note, I believe the statute itself indicates that the notice should describe the proposed budget. So I think the levy is not specifically mentioned, but I think it's hard to summarize the budget without making some reference to the proposed levy amount.
And
Manager
that
Anderson.
that levy amount is what? The same as
1.6.
1.6?
That would be the same to keep it flat, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
1,622,500 to be exact.
Okay. We should have been holding workshops to get through this sooner. Yeah, I certainly don't want it to be lower and then we have to raise it. So keeping it the same, that 4.9 and then the the current amount, whatever that exact amount is, we should do that. But one of the reports that I had asked for was on our a projection for what the next year will be, what we're really going to be basing this on. And I think that's really an important one. I mean, with all the building going on, we know that there's going to be an increase in value. And I don't have that breakdown, but it would be good to have the Washington County portion and the Chisago County portion of what our anticipated increase in that market value will be.
Thank you,
We
Manager
could-
Anderson.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can finish.
Well, I was just going to say that we can, certainly use that as an average, looking at especially the last couple of years of growth. It's probably going to slow down some, but I think we're still in that tail end of the growth period. So we need time to look at that and make sure that we're not shorting ourselves.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Emily, I saw you had your hand up. Are you good?
I just wanted to know, we'll post that information. We were planning on sending it out tomorrow, just ahead of that next board packet.
And when are you going to post this again? Is it Tuesday, Monday? What day?
We'd like to send it out on Monday.
You have to send it out on Monday.
The
Okay.
absolute latest, I think would be the end of the week, but I just don't like being up against the deadline. So if the board would like to reconvene, or we could do that.
What would the increase to the levy be if it were to increase at the previous rate? Is it 100,000 difference?
I can display that if we want to take a look. We had calculated what the increase would be if we increased it in step with the estimated market value and the net tax capacity. And so it would be, they're slightly different, pretty much in the same ballpark, but if we increased it in step with the estimated market value, it would go to 1.701. If we increased it at the same rate as the net tax capacity, it would be 1.712 million.
So it's pretty close. Wow.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have not been a part of the scheduling discussion involving, the managers and staff, and I don't want to upset anything, but I will just note that it can certainly occur that you have the public hearing at the same meeting that you do formally adopt your budget and levy. So legally speaking, you could hold that public hearing, your first meeting in September, which would give you more time to post the notice for it if you wished.
Mhm. I am much more comfortable with that. And that's what I thought we had done in the past as well. You don't want to post something to the public and then have it change. I mean, that's just a big no. So I'm going to withdraw my motion. And I think we need to have our meetings in August to finalize our budget, and then we post. Once we're all in agreement, we've considered all the issues, and we are comfortable with the budget ourselves, and then we will post.
Given the fact that Manager Smalls is absent from this meeting and the fact that myself and Manager Baki and Manager Taves are going through the budget process for the first time, I think that's a good idea to delay it. And so we can all get together when Manager Smalls returns.
Manager Loth, I concur with that, Manager Baki.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Emily, does that sound good?
Yeah, and thank you for suggesting that. I agree, that's a good way to go.
I think when we schedule the proposed or put together the proposed schedule for the budget, we were not aware that Manager Smalls would be gone at some of these potential meetings for discussion. So, and it's part of the reason why we have, I think the last couple of years have done this late August public hearing in peace, because then we in fact have a little buffer. And given that the September 15th deadline to the county is a hard deadline, you know, we certainly had a preference not to wait until the last minute, but this will certainly work. It'll be another week from that meeting then until we have to submit the levy certification forms. Thank you.
You know, as long as we're talking budget here, I was going to bring this up at the manager section, but I think it fits here. I was going to ask that staff look at funding our programs, some of our programs through the Clean Water Fund. And we've got that period of open application period right now. I think it's August 22nd or so, somewhere in late August, that this is ending. So I don't know that we've talked about or accessed these block grants that are going to counties. I believe they're open for watershed districts as well. And that's how Chisago County funds a lot of their water quality and lake programs. And so I think that we should take a look at that right now and explore funding. We could potentially, the biggest program we have is our AIS program right now. So if we can get 300,000 from a grant through Bowser, I think we need, or the DNR, I think we need to look at that.
Both managers, we certainly have the Clean Water Fund deadline on the radar.
Mhm.
And we plan to present our recommendations for grant applications at the next meeting. So they'll
Well,
coincide with the presentation on the Forest Lake, but
yeah, I'm suggesting that we go beyond our traditional project focus though on the monies and look at these programs that we have, established programs.
yes, absolutely. We'll take a look at that. I have not seen any guidance that has indicated that's moved beyond the counties, but we'll definitely just contact the Bowser staff tomorrow and get a read on
And
it.
don't forget DNR. DNR is where the AIS, information comes from. So let's explore that too.
Mhm.
There's nothing else on the budget. We can move to the report of staff. Mike sits first.
Manager Lowe's managers. Yeah, I don't think anything beyond what I have presented there comes to mind. We talked about the Green Corps member coming on board in September. But any, can entertain any questions the board might have. We have been working on both the tour and the state of the watershed programs. So at the staff level, so we're shaping that up and should have more details available quite soon in terms of the stop, the number of stops, the stop locations, and some of the sites that we'll plan to visit.
I just have two comments.
Go ahead,
Manager
Manager
Lowe.
Anderson.
Thank you. Under 3013, watershed planning and resiliency, you're talking about the proposal for floodplain vulnerability assessment. The board's going to get that later in the year. I wondered also if you have the ability with this information gathering that you're doing to give us any guidance on water sensitivity, groundwater sensitivity in the Chisago County area. I know Washington County has that information available. I don't know which agency that actually comes from, but and I don't know if the information that you've been gathering or EOR will help us with our Chisago County portion in getting at that information. But since we're focusing on the Comfort Lake Management District and Little Comfort District over the next couple of years, I wanted that on the radar for staff so that we can keep that in mind when we're doing these big projects like this, that we can always look at the holes, the gaps that we have in our existing data and see if there's an opportunity to use, the project that we're doing to gather that information also. And then under that 5200 lakes area, the one right under 3013, the note about the East Wetland in Little Comfort Lake area, management area, investigating the gravel pit area as a potential infiltration basin. That's very exciting news. And I'm glad to see that's going to be moving along with conversations with the landowner. That could be very, very helpful in reaching our water quality goals for Little Comfort. So that's a good development.
Yeah, on the first item, the watershed planning resiliency. So I did actually have a conversation with staff and EOR today. So we will be probably looking to merge more of those efforts in terms of the NRI, natural resource inventory work, and the floodplain vulnerability assessment piece, because rather than waiting until one is done, there's a lot of really good overlapping work that's being done by EOR and the district staff, or looking at our H&H work. I think Cecilia is probably will be presenting on, I'm not sure what the date is, but we're coming up on yet another component of that to be completed. But so yeah, that's still on track. That will, I think it will inform a lot of things, both in terms of our Green Lake corridor. It has the potential to feed into a Lessard-Sams program structure that we could get funded through that route, and really then be a tool that we can give to our community partners, our cities and counties, both for infrastructure and for land use planning. And once we have some maps, we'd like to take a look at some different scenarios, have EOR run some different things. So we might have to bring a revised scope back to the board, but what would an 8 or 10-inch rain event look like, or maybe a more severe one? I think just in the news again was St. Louis getting another 16-inch rainfall or something and being inundated. So these events are occurring. From a emergency management standpoint, I think it would be super valuable for our communities to know which areas would be inaccessible. Where would you maybe want to put roadblocks and not let traffic through, things like that. How much of Bone Lake would get flooded? Would Lofton Avenue be the high point, and different things. I mean, we presently don't have that information, and why all this assessment work is so important. So on the northeast wetland piece there, that is still being investigated by EOR. So we're not final on that, but that alternate plan, if you will, is looking optimistic. And yes, we've had a good conversation. Blaine and I went out, met with the landowner, and they were receptive to working with the district on that parcel. So yeah, looking forward to that. There's let's see what other the Lessard Sands folks met today, so we have not heard anything yet on that parse. Well, some of the initial ranking scoring, if you will, by the committee. So we'll see where that. Hopefully, we'll have some information on that forthcoming fairly soon.
Thanks, Mike. Cecilia, I see you have her hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, managers, wanted to add that our H&H modeling also has a groundwater component on it. So that would be part of the analysis. And regarding the pit option for diversion, we are at the point right now in which we have done the modeling. We have done a continuous simulation of an average year and see how much phosphorus we can divert and totally retain in that area. And we have come up with some preliminary thoughts of the potential area infiltration basins. And we are at the point right now in which we'll look at the potential cost and see the cost benefit for the project.
Nice. Can I ask a question of Cecilio, please?
Go ahead, Manager Anderson.
Thank you. Cecilio, are you looking at anything other than phosphorus? Are you looking at sediment, for example?
Correct, yes.
Nitrogen? I mean, we don't track nitrogen very often here, but that's coming right off of near a farm area, isn't it? Or is it wetland mostly behind it?
It's mostly wetland, but I mean, we're looking at all suspended solids and phosphorus. We can definitely look at nitrogen and and other components, because we have the data to be able to assume concentrations, and we have the calculations of the total volume of water being retained. So that should be easy enough.
Good, because I think especially the sediment is going to be important because of that area and what it's been doing for the last 50 years or so. So thank you.
Sure.
Did anyone have anything else for Mike on the administrator report? Otherwise, EOR can continue on. Cecilia, if you have anything else.
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Holtman.
Mr. Chair, managers, actually one item that may be of interest to you. The Minnesota Supreme Court last week issued an opinion interpreting the statute that involves how cities participate in nominating watershed managers for the county board's consideration. It was a lawsuit involving Rice Creek Watershed District, and the city of Circle Pines sued Anoka County, arguing that Circle Pines had submitted a list of nominees and that the county was obliged to appoint from the list they had submitted. We'll be providing a memo to you and our other clients, advising about the decision and offering some advice. But the bottom line is that the Supreme Court, we think, interpreted the statute to give a fair amount of authority to individual cities, more than we believe the statute intended. And for the short term, what I would say is that it's pretty essential if you're seeking reappointment to have your city formally nominate you to the county for reappointment. And other than that, we'll provide some more information in that memo. But if anybody has questions now, I'm happy to say more.
Manager Loth, Manager Baki. Chuck, would the city that the proposed manager resides in would make that recommendation, or would it be the cities that live or reside within the watershed district can make recommendations?
Well, any city or group of cities can make recommendations, and a nominee you could be nominated by a city other than the city in which you reside.
Okay, thank you.
Really? That's news to me. Wow.
Thank you, Chuck. Greg, I didn't mean to pass you up. Did you have anything you wanted to report on?
Sure, I can add a few things. I'll try to make it quick. Kind of covered a lot of things in the administrator's report, but maybe a few other things to note is just that we are moving ahead with some of our preliminary field work and feasibility work on the latest set of Clean Water Fund grants we got. So doing some surveying up in the Moody Lake area, and then also we've got another potential wetland project on the JD6 area that we're out doing some surveying and field work for. So those projects are still probably a year or two out, but just wanted to let you guys know that work is starting on those. And then the other kind of recent field activity was doing some soil testing out on some wetlands by July Avenue, and we're currently processing that data and looking at where there's some potential hot spots along there and how that might feed into the Bowser grant application. So I guess that's about all I got for now, unless there's other questions on the engineer's report in the packet.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? If not, we can move to Manager Anderson's report.
Okay, I think you all have the packets in front of you. Obviously, we got our first portion of levy money, so things are looking much different than the last couple of months. And I'll just move to page 3 of 11, and that shows us the income period for the period of $683,439.92. And we have bills, expenses for the period, that goes over to page 4, of $278,164.27. The other thing that's going to take place is a transfer, and our account is recommending an $89,000 transfer from savings to our payroll, our checking account. And also we will have a transfer coming out of the escrow receivable account, and that is into the checking account, and that's $19,341.49. And so with your approval, we will be able to pay the bills and make those transfers.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Can we get a motion to approve?
I will make a
Treasurer's
motion.
report?
I will make a motion to accept the treasurer's report
Thank you, Manager Baki.
Excuse me, and pay the bills.
And of course, pay the bills
Pay the bills and do the transfers, right?
and do those transfers.
Thank you.
I think Manager Tay has attempted to second that.
Yeah.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves, Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Before we move on to the report of managers, did we want to figure out, I saw your email, Mike, about the check signing tomorrow morning with Manager Small's absence.
Yes, who can join me in signing taxes, signing the check? I can't say it, the
I
check.
can do that.
Thank you.
I can help sign checks. What time would you like me there?
Bobby, what time do you get in?
I will be in at the office at 8 a.m. tomorrow, but you don't, no pressure to be there right at 8 a.m. Whenever works.
Okay, you'll go first, Manager. Is that Taves that said yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. When can you be there?
Would 8:30 be all right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I'll be in just a little later than that, 9:15 or so, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Report of managers, I'll just go down the line as they appear on my screen. Manager Baki,
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Manager Taves,
I drove by the Northeast Bone Lake restoration project there, and the spoils, that really looks good. I was surprised at how nicely that's coming along. The Lofton Avenue culvert's been replaced. That's all, it's been paved now too, so we're back in business here. Things are moving along nicely. Thanks.
thank you, Manager Taves. Manager Anderson,
I have two things. The first one is I attended that event sponsored by the Lower St. Croix on the Lake St. Croix boat, and it was really good. It was an education on best practices, a lot of shoreline talk and things like that. And a lot of people were there, about 125, 130 or so, they estimated. And I saw a number of folks from the Lower St. Croix group. It was targeted to city council members and county commissioners and city staff. And so it was well attended. I have a lot of material that I'd like to drop off tomorrow morning. Very, very good education materials, and also there's a new game about watersheds that I have some information on. We all broke into groups and played that game, and it's really interactive, and so folks that don't know much about watersheds will learn a number of good things. So it was well worth it. I've not been down at that area. I've taken the paddle boats out of Taylor's Falls, but not in that area. And so we were on a big, it wasn't a paddle boat, it was powered by engines, but it really was beautiful. And it was a beautiful day. So it was nice to see that portion of the river. And then I just wanted to mention also that I had read something recently that the St. Croix River was the third cleanest river system in the world. And so I was able to confirm that with the people from that river management group that was there from the DNR. And it was, that's kind of exciting to have it be that high up across the whole planet here. So that was wonderful. The other thing I wanted to make note of is that the Clean Water Council, we get these updates on the MOD board. And we just got one from the Clean Water Council. It's actually published, so maybe the district has that too. But we're working on the 24, or they're working on the 24-25 fiscal period for state disbursements. So that conversation we had about working ahead is right here in full bloom. They are doing something exciting. There's going to be another $27 million directed toward the implementation funds that go out to all of the One Watershed, One Plan entities. So in a couple of years, we're going to have, almost double what we have now available. So that's exciting. So what they're asking for is for counties, cities, watershed districts, and so forth to write a support or comments. It's a comment period. Comments on their plan. This plan goes to the legislature, and it's to inform the legislature what the Clean Water Council believes should be the focus during that period through the monies that they hand out. So if we could get a copy of that, Mike, to the board members for the next meeting, and maybe just have a brief comment on what our stance would be, give you time to think about it as well. I think we should do that. I think Maud's going to take a stab at it as well, but it's nice to hear from as many people as possible. Any comments and whether we approve or not approve. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. I don't have anything. So Chuck, can we get a summary and approval of board direction, please?
Mr. Chair, just a couple of items. One is regarding AIS. Staff, Garrett will be communicating with Jerry Gruntner about involving the Lake Association in flowering rush treatment, educating landowners, and they'll be looking to see if he has something suitable for online education. With respect to the budget, Manager Anderson asked that staff explore grant funding opportunities. I'm not sure Manager Anderson can elaborate if I missed something specific on that.
It was for programs. Specifically for programs, yeah.
Then Manager Anderson asked that staff be aware of existing gaps in groundwater sensitivity data in Chisago County and how we can fill those gaps when we're doing work for projects.
Chuck, I think we can strike that because Cecilio just answered that in real time, that they've got that information through the work they're doing on the inventory. Okay.
And then Emmons and Olivier will look to assess the water quality benefits for the Heath Avenue project, gravel pit project, more broadly than phosphorus and sediment, and look at nitrogen. And that's what I have.
Do we need to include the revisitation of the budget stuff with your report, Mr. Holtman?
Well, I don't believe there's a formal action that's needed. It would be up to staff to proceed with the steps in the process to work with you to get to where you need to be for your notice of public hearing.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn for the evening.
So move.
Do we have a second? I'll second that. Bobby, can we get a roll call, please?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Of course, yes.
Thank you, everyone.